play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of Hoops. It is early Wednesday morning. It was a late night here in New York City with the Spartans and a tough opening season loss to Kentucky. Dylan is still in Ann Arbor. We'll be making it back home eventually to Cleveland, but you were on hand at Chrysler last night, so we're just going to kind of go through some impressions of the openers for both teams, and I don't know, it's so hard to, like, when you have such anticipation to finally see a game that matters, and then to, like, almost stifle yourself from making any grand conclusions from said first game. It's a drug, man.
I think Michigan and Michigan State fans will be glad to not make any grand conclusions from the opening night of the college basketball season.
That is a great point. Yeah, we'll just get right into this thing this morning because Dylan needs to get home and I need to catch a flight. So, yeah, be sure to subscribe to Hoops and The Athletic and all that good stuff. But we're not going to bore you with too many pitches this morning. So, Dylan, we're going to start to the victors go the spoils. We will start in Ann Arbor. We'll start with Michigan's 79-71 win. So with 10 minutes left, kind of put me next to you on press row. I imagine you're writing a very flowery recap of, man, things are going right early on, and this is a great start, and probably everyone had the same impressions. And then in the snap of a finger, the entire narrative, feeling, general emotion of the night, I'm guessing, went flying out that back tunnel exit of Chrysler that goes out to the parking lot near the big house.
Yeah, I mean, 30 minutes into the game, Michigan's up 30 points. You're thinking, all right, this is what Michigan wants to be, establish the identity on the inside, just really cruising and look completely in control of the game. And then turnovers came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're looking at a game where everyone starts looking up at the scoreboard like this couldn't actually become a game. This couldn't actually become a game. All of a sudden it's a 4-point game in the last minute, and that was not what you could have imagined. Michigan really showed no signs of sweating for the first 30 minutes. It was all by the book, really a dominant performance, and then it was not so much. The post game was not what you would expect for the first win of the Juwan Howard era. Players weren't particularly excited. They were kind of like, what just happened? We know we need to get better than this. This is not what we wanted to show or do. And that was really all anyone could talk about, not the fact that Eli Brooks went for a career high. John Teske had a double-double in the first half. It was just, how did we get to this point, and what on earth happened in those final 10 minutes?
So I was mostly following along kind of on Stat Tracker and taking peeks at the game. I was streaming on the phone. And, you know, it's while keeping an eye on Duke, Kansas, kind of trying to pay attention to it. And it did seem like that, oh, look, here comes a little App State run. They're going to make it closer. Yeah, does App State cover the spread? To, oh man, this is getting real. This is now a thing. And then, holy shit, they might lose this game. Like, that kind of avalanche feeling. And it seemed like from afar, as everything got tighter, an offense, I think, which already has a very fine line of comfort level in itself, just got squeezed in a vice. There was one possession I remember watching with like 3.5 minutes to go on a baseline inbounds that was run to Eli Brooks. He came off a screen and was wide open. It was just a catch and shoot all day of the week, or every day of the week. And he just hesitated, went into a dribble, and the possession just fell to pieces right there. And it just looked like no one wanted to shoot. How much of the undoing do you think was I don't know, systemic of this personnel, the system, whatever, versus just a basketball game that just kind of went bad, which does happen even for really good teams.
Yeah, I look at it as probably a little bit of both, right? The run started when Michigan had a lineup that had 4 sophomores on the court, I believe. So it makes sense that you would have a couple hiccups then. And then it was more just there was no one that could pull everyone together and get back on track, right? And then the longer you're off track, the more you kind of get uncomfortable and you start hesitating, passing up shots, doing something you shouldn't, not making the easy play. The guy who's supposed to get Michigan back on track in that situation is Xavier Simpson, and he played one of his worst games at Michigan and just looked completely out of sorts. He was forcing passes where they weren't. He was just trying to make plays that weren't there and just never really looked comfortable. What really stands out to me is just how in charge of everything he was last year. And this year you look at it and you can tell he's still trying to kind of find his way into this offensive system. It's not just a high ball screen every time. He doesn't know where every player is on the court, and he's really trying to just pass the ball into windows that aren't always there. So he just never really got into the game. He picked up 2 fouls early in the first half, and then he's the guy you expect when Michigan gives up a 10-2 run that, okay, Simpson's going to make a play. It wasn't Xavier Simpson, so then who? And then it just turned into a bunch of people looking around like, who's it going to be? Because it's the first game of the year. This team doesn't have that guy like they did last year, right? Like you knew who you're going to go to. You know if the ball's going to Iggy Brastakis late in the game, he's going to hit a big shot, right? Like he embraced that role. Here, it's a bunch of guys looking around like, should I take it? Should you take it? Do I need to move the ball? Do I need to make a play? And no one's completely comfortable in that role.
Right. Yeah, it's tough if your best player on a given night is like a John Teskey. It's tough to have like a 7-foot center be that guy.
I mean, in the first half, John Teskey was that guy. They threw the ball into the post over and over again. He was really effective. In the second half, between a combination of zone defense and double teams,
sure,
Appalachian State kind of took that away. And probably the first time John Teskey's been double teamed since he was at Medina. So he did not necessarily react well to that. Through one time he got, I think, basically triple teamed and tried to throw the ball across the court. It went right to Juwan Howard, right? So that's an area for growth, and that's an area he will grow. I mean, I didn't think he'd be able to go and score 17 points down on the block in the first half like he did, basically. So he's growing, but he's not ready to just pick apart another team from the block facing double teams all game.
Yeah, and when I said like a guy who it's tough to have him as your answer guy, I mean more so just because he inherently needs someone to make a play to get him the ball. So, I see your point, and I mean bottom line, even if that run didn't happen, if it never got as close as it did late, what was it, down to 4 at one point?
4 points in the last minute.
There are some things where you're scratching your head looking at it and saying, like, this is not a good indicator in game 1. 11 turnovers combined from Simpson and Livers, who are supposed to be your 2 kind of bedrock guys.
I believe it was 9 turnovers in the last 9 minutes, including 5 in a row, I'm pretty sure. So, and that's the thing. It's one thing to give up a big run when you're missing shots.
Yes.
It's a little scarier when you're turning the ball over left and right. Because if you just get a shot every possession when you're up 30 points, you're going to win by 20 points. Even if you shoot 2 of 10, right? Like, turnovers also lead to bad defense, and then everything starts to spiral out of control.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part. And like you say, Livers and Simpson, if they're turning the ball over 11 times in a game, Michigan's going to be in some issues like this. And I think, and is it a systemic thing? You can't say that now after one game. And Simpson's played 2 years in a row as a starter where he really hasn't struggled with turnovers. But it is notable considering how turnover averse Michigan was to the extreme under John Beelan.
And fouls.
Yeah, fouls is an interesting one. Part of it is just that if you're playing this was another 77 possession game, there's a lot more possessions to commit a foul. You don't get more fouls for more possessions. Like, that's not a tempo-free stat.
Right.
So you're going to be in foul trouble more often if you're playing more possessions because there's just more chances to foul someone. And that's, I think, an adjustment for a guy like Xavier Simpson.
Yeah.
He might have to change how he plays a little bit.
I think it also goes beyond that, and what that is, I don't know. I still have to kind of rewatch the game, but like, I mean, how much of the fouls were being over aggressive? I mean, like, what was it? Were they just trying to get up on guys just way more than has been done previously? I mean, like, what situations created the fouls, not what possessions?
I would have to go back and watch all the film, but Livers kind of ended up in foul trouble doing a lot of kind of reaching for blocks and stuff around the rim, if I'm remembering right. Simpson did get a little handsy, I'd say, because he just always kind of has a way to – he can get in foul trouble. He's really masterful at fouling you without getting caught. So sort of just caught with his hand in the cookie jar, I'd say. Michigan did force turnovers on 25% of App State's possessions, which is a shift, right? Like, the previous defense was not designed around forcing turnovers, and I did think they were more aggressive. They had 8 steals, so it's definitely an area where they want to try to turn you over. But again, this is just an 8-man rotation. There's not the depth to really weather significant foul trouble on this Michigan roster right now.
So with Xavier, he's such an interesting player in that when you watch him, he's got all these little moves and tricks and kind of odd ways of making plays, whether it's just the way he passes the ball, tries a lot of like kind of what if you just saw it on film without knowing him and trusting him, you'd be like, well, that's kind of a risky way of passing, right? He has those big one-hand passes and things like that just kind of have always skirted the line of fundamentals, where it was always interesting to kind of watch him operate in Beilein's offense. And it's kind of a curious thing to now see this player playing within a different set of standards and kind of, system-based asks, for lack of a better term. Like, him playing the way that he does sometimes, which can be, I don't know if fast and loose is the right way, but just, like I said, kind of just right on that line of risky versus, like, overly risky for no reason versus just, like, making a simple play. Do you think this is something where he just kind of needs to find his bearings a little bit this year, and it's nothing to really bat an eye at, or where do you kind of come down on that, if you even understand what I just rambled about?
Heard Xavier Simpson. Well, I think that he is clearly not completely comfortable in this system, right? And that's fine. I don't think I would call him a high-risk player in the past, right? Like, he makes tough passes, but he was never a turnover-prone point guard, right? He's been effective at valuing the basketball. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played for Beilein. He did throw a lot of one-handed passes that didn't really look like they had a chance and ended up not having a chance. And that's going to be an area to grow. Juwan Howard was talking about his high school coach always taught him to pass the ball with 2 hands after the game. So might be some lessons on film coming up for Xavier Simpson. At the same point, I think you're going to see his turnovers increase because he's going to be forced to do even more as far as creating offense, right? Like, Michigan doesn't just need him to be a game manager point guard. Michigan needs him to be a guy who can go get you 10 assists on nights that matter. So he needs to kind of find his way, and I don't know if that means putting in a couple sets that make him more comfortable, that you can run when you're up against it and want to make it like Xavier Simpson time. Like, if you're going to just go with a high ball screen and spread the floor and let Simpson operate late in games. Right Right now, he's just sort of feel like caught in the middle. But at the same point, I thought John Teskey looked completely uncomfortable in the exhibition game, and then he looked fantastic today. So I think there's going to be a learning curve with a lot of these guys, especially the ones that had really tried and true roles ironed out under the previous regime. There's going to be times when they're caught between two minds. They're caught between figuring out that right balance. And I don't think I would raise the alarm that Xavier Simpson had 6 turnovers in a game. But at the same time, you'd like to see him put together a game where, he's got this. He knows he's completely in charge of the team. He's running the offense. And that certainly has not been the exhibition or this game.
So on the offensive glass, they had 11 offensive boards. They only had last year. They had 6 double-digit offensive rebound games all year. Season high was 13. They had 11 once, so the rest were all 10. So 11 last night in the opener, 4 for Teskey, 3 for Brandon Johns. What did you see on offensive rebounding in terms of maybe sending an extra guy or two? And do you think I think this is going to be a team that does have times of serious struggles scoring the ball. Do you see possibly that as an area of that could kind of be a scoring point, output or outlet?
Yeah, so they only rebounded 31% of their misses, which isn't astronomically high. So I think that overall, that 11 has more to do with 77 possessions than it does with an actual crazy amount of rebounding, which is obviously, I think Teskey was really active early, crashing the glass. I thought Brandon Johns had some really good moments where he crashed, but wasn't like Michigan was sending like 3 guys to the rim to crash. I think it's the 4 and the 5. They played Colin Castleton and Teskey together for maybe 4 or 5 minutes at one point, which is a unique look, and I think Colin played well. I think Michigan's 4 and 5 options are further ahead than their 2 and 3 options, or really their 3, right? So it is something, and I think post-ups are generally shots that are easier to offensive rebound, because like the big's already there. It's just kind of more of a offensive rebounding situation, right? And a couple of Teskey's first basket, he just missed and then got it back. So you're going to pick up those kind of cheap offensive boards. But yeah, it's not like Michigan went out and rebounded half their missed shots on the night.
Sure. Bright spots for you?
Eli Brooks. Eli looked fantastic. He looked like the best player on the court for me, really on both ends of the floor. He played with confidence on offense, hit shots, was flying around, just really seemed comfortable in a system in a way a lot of other guys didn't. And even on defense, he showed more than I think most people expected. They put him onto Justin Forrest midway through the first half after he was kind of torching to Julius a bit, and Eli slowed him down for a bit. Obviously, Forrest got going again late, but I think that Eli looks like you're really comfortable with him there. Teskey played a great game. So those are good spots, I'd say.
Was there, lineup-wise, anything that was maybe unexpected? Did they play any 3-guard? Did they ever have all 3 out together?
Yes, they started all 3 guards in the second half.
Okay.
Adrian Nunez had 3 fouls, I think, already in the first half. So Nunez really struggled defensively. He picked up 4 fouls in 13 minutes, and that left Michigan in a spot where I think they were only really they're more comfortable with playing 3 guards than 2 bigs, if that makes sense. So they would rather play the 3-point guards than put Johns or Colin on the court and slide Isaiah down against App State. So that left Julius playing 28 minutes. He did not score, had a couple assists. You want to get more out of that spot, I think, right now, especially if you're just going to go with this 8-man rotation, because Michigan just needs a wing who can kind of get down a hill and make something happen, and they don't have that right now, I don't think.
So would you buy into the notion that in the bigger picture, it might actually, this is probably a little narrative, so I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but it could actually be a good thing that you get the win. They showed plenty of good stuff. And also we're reminded for 10 minutes that their shit doesn't stink and that like they need, like every practice needs to be pretty dialed in early in the season here, because if it's not, losses could pile up rather quickly in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They were going in fat and happy. I think everyone knows there's still a work in progress.
But if they just march through and just had a 30-point win, you know,
yeah,
I'd rather have a team that comes into practice today saying, all right, what do we need to fix?
Yeah, they look like a team that was worried about what they needed to fix more than happy they won a game. Mm-hmm. No doubt about that. That Creighton game is just massive.
Yeah.
That is just such a swing game for Michigan's early season schedule without Franz Wagner, a team that you should beat at home, but a team that could beat you, right? And if you drop that one, you're headed into the Bahamas and you're trying to make up ground, which is really just not where you want to be at this point in the season. So that game could be sort of found money for Michigan, mm-hmm. or it could be, oh shit, we're up against it.
Right.
So a big week coming up here in practice to try to get ready for that.
And Creighton is off to a 1-0 start with a 81-55 win over Kennesaw State last night.
Creighton has no bigs.
They will not play until that Michigan game in Ann Arbor next Tuesday. So, yeah, anything
Creighton's
else on Michigan before
biggest starter is 6'7". So going to be a big test of either can Michigan dominate inside or can Michigan not guard the perimeter? We'll find out.
What happened to the Epperson kid? Isn't he there?
Yeah, he broke his leg, I believe, or had a bad leg injury.
Well, there you go. Okay. Anything else on Michigan before we move over here?
No, I think that's it. Let's get to the national showcase game in New York City.
Yeah.
You were on the scene.
I was there.
How was the environment in the Champions Classic this year?
Environment was odd. The biggest fan base was Kansas. And you just expect it to be Kentucky because it's Kentucky, and you would even expect it to be Duke because we're in New York.
New York City.
Right. But there was just a shit ton of Kansas fans there. And they got to see their team turn the ball over 28 times. So Godspeed to the Jayhawks, because that was...
And cover the spread.
That was awful. Little backdoor on the end, man. That was big time. Yeah, that game was... Both games were ugly. If these are the four best teams in the country right now, it says a lot about college basketball. There's going to be a lot of parity. I think your best 2, 4, 8 teams in the country are going to be 4, 5, 6 loss teams, I think. Minimum.
That sounds right.
No one is amazing. You remember the Champions Classic last year where freaking Duke was rocking and rolling. The Zion show was in full effect, and it was like, it almost seemed like a transcendent moment in basketball. And this was clearly the best team. And then you had Kansas out there. Quentin Grimes goes and makes 6 threes, and they ran past Michigan State, and they looked pretty amazing. A year later, Quentin Grimes is no longer on the team, and Kansas proved to be something very different.
So we're not crowning a national champion in November this year.
We are.
Is that confirmed in New York? You have on the ground reporting.
Confirmed with my sources on the ground. Yeah, I thought it was. What do you got?
Here's my one big picture narrative on this year's Champions Classic. Like, the games might have been ugly, but I think you can paint a path for every one of those teams to be a lot better in March. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the difference between a team that might be clicking on all cylinders that's like a top 15 team early in the year because they have experience, this and that. There's enough talent on those rosters that you can still see why they're top 4 teams, and they'll be relevant later in the year, I think, even if they're playing a hideous, ugly brand of basketball right now.
And there were some studs out there. Cassius Stanley from Duke was just a certified dude in the second half of that game. And, man, Maxey from Kentucky was something else. That was a huge performance by a guy who did not even start the game. Talking to a number of people from Kentucky and our Kentucky beat writer Kyle Tucker, like that was not expected from Tyrese Maxey. First of all, he's not billed as a shooter, and he made 3 threes, including 2 just big balls shots, like just major league stuff. Scored 20 whatever off the bench. He did not have a good preseason by all accounts. And even Cal in the postgame there was saying, like, we have not seen this from him. I'm not sure where this came from. And, I don't know if Maxey's a guy, that was a first-team All-American performance. I don't know if Maxey's going to be a first-team All-American for the next 37 games or whatever. But, yeah, your point is right. But getting into kind of Michigan State and the loss, I come away from here still thinking that, Michigan State's still probably the number one or the best team in the country, in my book, just in terms of what's there.
What's the case for that?
Well, this game was, I think if you put them out toe-to-toe again, Michigan State is right there with them, if not a touch above. The first half went sideways right away. You had Aaron Henry on the bench 2 minutes, 38 seconds into the game. Everything fell apart from there. You have Xavier Tillman picks up 2 offensive fouls in the first half, and you can say they weren't offensive fouls. Well, that's fine. But at the same time, Xavier Tillman's freaking huge, and there's people bounce off of him. And you need to be aware of your space, and you need to be aware of your size. And Xavier was the first one to admit that in the locker room after the game. He's just like, I need to be better. Body control. If I was maybe a touch more under control, I could have stopped before it was that kind of impact and blah, 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 blah. Xavier Tillman played 29 minutes in a 7-point loss and was plus 11.
Wow.
He just makes all the difference in the world, and you lose him for key stretches of the first half, and Michigan State is just a completely different team. So,
it's funny though.
There were 26 fouls in the first half of that game.
Last year at the Breslin Center, Michigan State, the same thing happened to Tillman. He missed a bunch of time in the first half with 2 fouls, and then Michigan State came rip-roaring back in the second half, if you remember, right? Mm-hmm. They had that extra gear that they would come to over and over and over again, which I think they're still trying to find, which is natural early in the season. But do you remember that? It's kind of the same narrative where Michigan State looked completely out of sorts when Tillman went to the bench, but then everything looked magical in the second half, and Winston sort of picked everything apart.
Yes. So, on the point I was making, that I still think Michigan State's still probably the best team in the country. They went 5 for 26 on 3-pointers. Missed just a ton of really good open looks. Cassius Winston wide open with it as a 4-point game. Would have cut the lead down to 1. Just missed a 3-pointer that he's made his entire career, and that you would bank on him making for the rest of this season. He missed it. And 2 minutes later, it was a 13-point game. And Michigan State had to climb all the way back. Kyle Arnes down the stretch gets an open look in the corner. There wasn't anyone within 15 feet of him. I trust him to make that shot. Tom Izzo would trust him to make that shot.
Matt McQuaid might have had 25 in that game.
You're damn right he would have. Yes, absolutely.
That's what Michigan State's missing. And that's what scares me a little bit about this team right now is...
Hey, Josh Langford might have had 25 in that game.
Yeah, for sure. They just need... The questions were at the 2 and the 4, and I don't think anything that happened in this game is really going to make anyone feel better about that. It's not going to maybe to make you feel worse, because there's still potential and there's guys there. People showed a couple things here and there, but that reliable 3-point shooting at those two spots is still a weakness where you go 5 of 26. And
Right.
until you can get that, I think that's the biggest concern with this team right now.
Yeah, Rocket Watts goes 0 for 2. Gabe Brown 2 for 6. Xavier Tillman, I still am not a big Xavier Tillman 3-point shot guy. I know if he's wide open, you got to take it, and you need to show defenses that he's willing to take it. But
one of those was late. He was 0 for 3, but one of them was like the game was over, right?
Okay.
The final shot of the game, I think. So I'm fine with him taking 1 or 2 shots in a game.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a huge problem. But you're not looking at it and thinking, oh, that's going in when he shoots it.
no. But then the big one, Cassius goes 1 for 7. This guy is a career 40-something% 3-point shooter.
Yeah,
sure,
so
sure
here's
he wants
my
a lot
thing
of that back.
Cassius is going to have bad shooting games.
Mm-hmm.
When he had bad shooting games last year, he would have 10 assists.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 assists is an indictment of how Kentucky guarded him, but also that Michigan State just didn't hit those open jumpers, right?
And a lot
you
of the
could
passes,
guard Cassius Winston like this last year because Michigan State would bury threes all over the court against you.
Well, I mean, teams couldn't guard Cassius Winston this way because few teams look the way Kentucky does, and that's the other thing here is Kentucky is huge. They're super long at every single position. They just went all in on guarding Winston in the ball screens. I think they were more aggressive than Michigan State was ready for and that they prepared for. But every single time you had both a big and a guard on Winston, where the guard was preventing him from, taking the edge and being able to drive if he wanted to, and then you had the big there blocking any sort of passing lane to even complete a pass, even if it was there. And Tillman was saying in the locker room afterward that they were going into timeouts, and Cassius was telling him, "I can't see you." So he's coming out of a ball screen looking to make that pass to Tillman rolling, which is just their absolute bread and butter, and couldn't even see the guy. So that's not replicable. Sure as hell not in the Big Ten. So how big of a concern is that? I don't know. If you run into Kentucky in the Final Four or something like that, yeah, it'd certainly be a concern again. But that's just not something you're going to see very often. Now, teams might try to do what Kentucky did, but I don't know how many teams are going to have the bodies and the athletes to do it the way they did it.
Yeah, I think teams are going to trap, blitz, the pick and roll, whatever you want to call it. They're going to overhelp off the wings until someone proves otherwise. And that's going to be the thing for Michigan State that probably is nice is you can prove otherwise against teams that maybe aren't as good, right? Like if Aaron Henry just starts hitting threes in bye games, then you're going to guard him differently. So that's really the key, I think, is for just finding guys who can hit shots because that'll make Michigan State so much harder to guard, right? And any other, I guess,
well, just one more thing on
for you?
this. One more thing on this. Something I found kind of curious was talking to people after the game within Michigan State. There was kind of a feeling of and this is me speaking for them, we needed different options when the ball screen wasn't there. We needed better answers in response in terms of being able to go to something that they just didn't quite have. And whether that's a symptom of it being November 5th, probably has a lot to do with it. But then I brought that up to Tom Izzo walking to the team bus, and he's like, no. We just didn't execute in the ball screen. He was really pissed at how they actually executed in those ball screens, regardless of what Kentucky was doing. So he kind of had a feeling that, the plan that everything was there. They just didn't get the looks that they.
Yeah, when you shoot 5 of 26,
sure.
It's a make or miss game, right? You have to make shots.
Totally different talking point today. What are we saying if, a couple of those fall? And you can say this for so many basketball games, obviously, but this one just sticks out because, first of all, they were so wide open. And Michigan State, even without Matt McQuaid and even without Josh Langford, I still think is going to be a top third of the Big Ten shooting team. Fair?
Yeah, my thing is, so look at the starting lineup. The 4 guys with Winston, I'm not watching any of them shoot a 3 and saying that's in.
Well, first of all, we need to see more from Rocket Watts.
Has he made a 3 in the 2 open games? The exhibition and this? I think he's 0 for, right? Because you were saying it was a good thing that he was 0 for 5 in the or 0 for 3 in the exhibition game.
I said I was going to stop.
Take there.
I said I was going to stop him from maybe being a little bit too jacked up, juiced up, and instead he came out playing about 100. I thought he was at 100 miles per hour against Albion. I think he was about 110 last night.
So
no, I think it's
look at
it's
Gabe Brown. Like
fair.
You get him in the starting. Like he's the guy I would say. Man, I think he can be a guy who shoots 40% from 3 and with volume. Like, right. And I'm sure there's reasons he's not in the starting lineup, and he has to build that trust on defense and everything else. But that starting lineup last year had shooters. This year, there's no one you're going to cover as a shooter in that starting lineup right now, and that's going to be a thing until it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the big one is Aaron Henry. Like, he needs to prove that he can do it. You know, he went 1 for 3 last night, and, you know, he was all out of sorts after the game just because of his first half. And I thought he was really good in the second half.
Yeah, I thought he showed a couple good moments there.
For sure. And just even when you need a bucket at this point, you know, even getting him with his back to the basket or putting him one-on-one with a guy outside, like he just makes things happen, and he's got a big bag of tricks. But, you know, the 3-point shooting, it's worth remembering he went over 2 months with being 2 threes last year. Like, can he shoot? Can he make threes? Absolutely. Can he also maybe go up 2 weeks without making one? Yes, also at the same time, which is kind of a precarious situation to be in when he's your third guy. Because, you know, Izzo did make the point last night. He's like, look, regardless of what Kentucky was doing on defense, and regardless of what our young guys did, blah, blah, like, if, in a game like this, if Cassius, Xavier Tillman, and Aaron Henry aren't all on the floor and on point, the rest doesn't matter. Because, like, that has to be point A, B, and C. And then anything else after that's gravy. Yeah,
I love Aaron Henry's little sort of in-between game when he can get in the paint and throw that little kind of, it's like a floater sort of half shot.
Mm-hmm. He's got that little pivot kind of spin around, half step, whatever.
Because he can always get past his man when he's like playing off the catch, and then he just gets to that spot and his money from there. He just, I think, needs to get there more often. I think you look at 3 assists and no turnovers is a good sign for him. Mm-hmm. Especially like as he's kind of expanding his game a bit. But so
I have a concern from this game.
Okay. Let's see if it's what I was going to mention.
You can't play Cassius Winston 40 minutes a game. And right now,
first, why?
Okay, because he'll be worn out when the games actually matter. And you don't need a broken down Cassius Winston in February and March and possibly April. So in the games that matter right now, like, can you maybe get away with it here and there? Yeah, but the backup point guard spot, I'm just not sure where Foster Loyer is going to be. Like, what's a reasonable level of expectation for him at this point is, I just think it's fairly low. And
certainly not for him to be on the floor in this game. I mean, no. It's just
it was not. It was a
most athletic backcourt he'll face.
Yeah, that was a non-starter. And Rocket Watts is, he certainly seems like he has a, you know, down the line as a possible answer. Sure, right now his passing is not there. It's just he's going faster than the game. And, he just made some passes and some decisions last night where it was freshman. I'm not going to pound the guy for committing turnovers against Kentucky at Madison Square Garden in his first game of his college career, But in terms of them having a good, viable option to give Cassius 5 minutes a half on the bench, I'm sure Watts will be more than fine against Binghamton and Charleston Southern, but against Seton Hall and maybe more importantly, 3 games in 3 days in Maui, I'm not sure what that spot looks like.
Yeah, do you think that it could affect his ability to back up the point guard spot by also starting at the 2? Like, is he going to be stretched in too many different ways, or do you think that's not a big issue?
Maybe. In terms of asking him to know his reads and know everything he needs to know, that's probably a lot to have him at both spots. But I don't think you really have many options beyond that.
Yeah, and you can't worry about how a freshman plays. And I just kind of throw that out, right? He's going to be a good player. If you go back and look at some of the different early season performances from dudes who had great seasons, I'm sure there are a lot of games like that, especially when you have as sort of maniacal of early season schedule as playing in the Champions Classic. So I don't know. It's sort of like Xavier Simpson. He struggled, but I don't think it's a sound the alarm, sell all your Rocket Watts stock. I think it's a reminder of how important he is to this team's ceiling, though. I don't know that you can get there without him being a guy who you can really count on. Because if he's not producing, where do you go next, right?
No doubt. No, I completely agree. It's just these are the questions that kind of arise from a game like this. But, some of his... They asked a lot of him when they had to sit Cassius with 4 fouls with about 7 minutes to go and try to survive a 3-minute stretch with him. I think he had 2 turnovers in that. That might be... I think that's right. And they were just freshman, just plainly freshman mistake turnovers. It was not, Kentucky doing anything over the top to force him into a bad spot.
You say Cassius can't play 39 minutes a game. I say Cassius Winston cannot foul. He cannot. He did this last year, early in the year. I think the foul out of the Louisville game. You can't do. He can't. They can't afford that. You cannot be in foul trouble in a game that matters. And it's not like he is a defensive stopper.
Right.
Don't be getting into foul trouble because they need him on the court. Do you agree with that?
Oh, totally.
That needs to be the message, and I think great player of the year offensive players have to understand that, and that it's not worth it. And I think it's probably an early season thing. Everyone's excited. They called 42 fouls in the game, so everyone was basically fouling. But that's just got to be a thing that stops, I think, if Michigan State's going to be good with this roster. Yeah. Are you worried at all about perimeter defense? Obviously, you hold a team under a point per possession. That's good. You should be able to win. But basically all of Kentucky's scoring came from Maxey, Quickly, Hagens.
Well, part of that is because their bigs just aren't scorers.
True.
All the offense was going through the guards. So I'm sure Cal would have loved to have had an option down there, but they're just the choices there. Other than the big kid from Bucknell making a couple shots, they're just.
But 23 free throws for those 3 guards.
Well, it's Kentucky. This is what Kentucky does. It's offensive rebounds and free throws. They just go downhill on you all day and just force you into brutal spots. They draw fouls. This is how I feel like there's kind of this, I'm not saying from you, but I feel like there's this kind of illusion of what Kentucky basketball is, that it's all these pros running around, making threes and jumping and dunking and high flying. It's yes, but at the end of the day, Kentucky's real basketball is dirty, punch you in the face, play at the rim, above the rim, defend the shit out of you, have big, long athletes all over the place, take 25 free throws, and wear your ass out that way.
Yeah, that was a Kentucky game.
Big time. And it's actually interesting to watch them play this way because, E.J. Montgomery and Nick Richards are just, I think they combined for 4 made baskets. And they're the two, when you watch Kentucky in warmups, you're like, look at these guys. They're just monsters. And now they made a big difference in the ball screen defense, but offensively they were just non-factors, really. It's Kentucky's going to kill you with the guards. The things that was a little concerning, not even concerning, really, because, with Maxey, I was making this point to, I guess, Douster after the game, like, is he a 30% shooter who went 3 for 7 against Michigan State? Might be the case. Maxey does not build as a 3-point shooter.
He's a scorer. He's going to be, he's the best player on Kentucky.
Yes.
I don't think it's close. You're throwing all this shade at Tyrese Maxey.
I'm not throwing shade.
Maybe he listened to the moving screen and didn't like you calling him Tyree in the preview pod.
Fair.
He's by far the best player on this team. I'm not surprised that he scored 20 plus points. He's going to be, he can shoot, he can score, he's that floater game.
Sure.
This is all stuff he showed in EYBL. I don't think that's
great
flip.
That's great that he did that in EYBL. Terrific. At the same time, Emmanuel quickly started in this game because he had a much better preseason than Maxey.
Emmanuel Quickly is a sophomore at Kentucky. That says everything you need to know. I don't think it's surprising to bring a freshman off the bench and act like they're not playing well early in the season.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden they're a thing. I think you're overreacting to that, and that's probably just Cal realizing he wants his best player to play better.
I'm overreacting to it. I'm the one who just said that they were. Of course, Kentucky's getting all of its production from its guards because its bigs aren't that good, and its guards are where all their talent are, and it starts with Maxey. One of the interesting things that I don't think many people were expecting was what Ashton Hagans gave him in the first half, scoring wise, when there was like a stretch of time there where both teams were kind of in the grinder and couldn't really get things going offensively. And like Hagans made a couple floaters that was not maybe his rep. He did some big time stuff. So,
great defensive rebounding performance by Michigan State, I would say. You give them that? Kentucky only rebounded 18% of their misses, and that's a team that'll probably offensive rebound a lot better than that.
Considering its opponent,
especially considering who was out there, like
exactly.
Bingham's playing 17 minutes. I think that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was going into this game expecting Malik Hall to get the minutes that he got, or expecting Julius Marble to be out there for stretches of time. Thomas Kithier, considering who he was going against, certainly held his own, which is, you'll take that all day, especially considering the questions at the 4. Yeah, I don't know. I think I might have exhausted my takes.
Marcus Bingham made 3 2-pointers after 0 as a freshman. Well, let's give him some props. I thought he played well in the first half.
Marcus Bingham, I think this game was a perfect portrait of Marcus Bingham because it was all the upside, and he gave them a major boost in the first half. And really, he was the only kind of answer that they had when everyone was a little bit, I don't know if caught off guard is the right way of saying it, but Michigan State was immediately overwhelmed by Kentucky's length. And putting Bingham in was really one of the few kind of counters or answers that they had personnel-wise to match any of that. And yeah, he gave him some great buckets. And at the same time, missed a couple defensive assignments, just threw the ball to nobody twice. You don't want the backup to the backup at the 5 committing 2 of your 16 turnovers. unforced, just threw the ball out of bounds. So, there's just always going to, it feels like right now there's just always going to be times where you're watching Bingham and it's just going to be a great moment followed by a head-scratching moment followed by a great moment. And, maybe at some point, maybe he'll find his level. And if that does happen, he does change Michigan State just as a completely different look that other teams will have a hard time, I think, adjusting to in real time.
So what's the near term, where does Michigan State go from here? You got Binghamton this weekend and then that big Seton Hall game on the road. What is the level of concern? What's kind of do you make any adjustments? Where's your head at as far as what Michigan State needs to do right now?
Well, I think they need to work on executing better in what they're going to see matchup-wise on these ball screens. It's going to be teams kind of selling out to stop them in the ball screen. So you either need to be able to execute that better or find other options. And if that's going to be pin downs or that's going to be getting the ball to Tillman with his back to the basket or almost kind of going weak side ISOs for Cassius or Aaron Henry, whatever it is, you need to find different things to maybe mix it up a little bit. And that's when I thought, when Michigan State got going in the second half, I think that's what they were doing. They were showing a lot of different things. In the first half, it was just ball screen, ball screen, ball screen. I charted it. And this is not I'm sure Synergy might have a different number or whatever. This was just kind of my freehand count. But
we want the freehand count. Bring us the real
absolutely.
thing.
It's I had them at 17 sets that started out of a ball screen for Cassius Winston.
In the game or the first half?
In the first half. And 2 of them resulted in field goals. Only one being for Winston himself. I think he only got 2 or 3 shots attempts out of those looks. Which is kind of...
can coach some defense, man.
That is jarring. And the second half, I had it at I actually don't know this offhand, but it was probably half of that.
Okay.
They definitely went away from what they were doing. So, but at the same time, that the look for the wide open look for Arns kind of came off of a set that started out of a ball screen. I believe Cassius did too. But point being, especially for that Seton Hall game, Seton Hall's got athletes. Seton Hall's got big dudes who can hang physically and probably get out and disrupt ball screens and try to replicate a little bit of what Kentucky did. I'm getting a thumbs down from
Seton
Dylan.
Hall's garbage.
Garbage, okay.
Most overrated team in college basketball.
Woo!
Book it. Huge bounce back spot
Wow.
on the road. But I agree. They'll make adjustments in the ball screen game. I also do not think Seton Hall can come 40% of replicating what Kentucky did on defense.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Alarm's going off over there.
That's my emergency alarm. That was in case I slept through all of them earlier, that I wouldn't miss my flight.
True travel pro.
That also means it's I need to be getting out of here in about 10 minutes to get to JFK to catch my flight, because there's nothing better than trying to work your way across New York morning after having about 2 hours of sleep. So that's awesome.
College basketball season is back. You're back on the road.
And coming right back here. Who wouldn't want? Now I get to go back to Newark. Lovely Newark.
That's where everyone wants to be. So,
Right.
All right. Sorry to just rag on Seton Hall, but I think that is just such a nice...
It's interesting. Seton Hall, Ken Palm only puts him at 36% in a home game.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Seton Hall is not a great team.
They put it on Wagner. Put it on Wagner last night. Seahawks.
Okay. And
Seahawks
they'll probably
got
put it on
got.
Stony Brook. And then people will be excited.
Uh-huh.
I just think that's at Michigan State. I'd be all over Michigan State in that spot. I think they will. I think it will be like night and day as far as what Seton Hall can actually do in ball screen defense versus what Kentucky did to Michigan State. You're just not going to face teams like Kentucky very often. And for Michigan, I mean, Michigan State will play some good teams. No, don't get me wrong, but with that sort of length and athleticism, it's just a different level of taking you out of your shit, you know?
Okay, well then we'll just, I guess why even bother playing the game?
Lock it in.
There you go. Okay, well that'll do it for this week, folks. Be sure to leave us a review in the iTunes store. Share this podcast with your Michigan and Michigan State friends and family. And subscribe to UM Hoops, subscribe to The Athletic, and be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.